Hello, everyone. My name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to episode number 30 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we are thrilled to have Captain Bill Speros as a guest on the podcast. Bill is a 1989 graduate of Cathedral Prep and currently a partner at McDonald-Illig. He is an agile and driven litigator who has successfully prosecuted and defended high-profile, multi-million-dollar federal contracts awards before the United States Courts of Federal Claims, the Government Accountability Office, the Federal Boards of Contract Appeals, and in various state courts. In business transaction, Bill is a forward thinker who helps his clients close deals that grow revenue while mitigating risk and protecting the brand. He counsels his clients on contract formation and disputes, corporate compliance, business acquisitions, internal and external investigations, in various export control and international trade matters, including the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, the Export Administration Regulations, and the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States. In January 2022, Bill was appointed as a solicitor for the Erie County and currently serves the county in that role. Prior to joining McDonald-Illig, Bill practiced law in Washington, D.C. offices of the Fried Frank Law Firm and Arnold & Porter, LLP, and was a professor in the legal writing department at GW Law School, and then worked as a senior in-house counsel at a Global Fortune 250 human capital management company. Before his law career, Bill served as an officer and pilot in the U.S. Air Force. He is a decorated veteran of several combat and humanitarian operations, including the Kosovo campaign and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He currently serves on the board of directors for the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership, the Erie County Bar Association, and the athletic board member and head swim team coach for St. Jude School. Bill is married to Amanda, and together they have 4 kids: Bella, who is 15, prep class of 2026, Coco, who is 14, prep class of 2027, William, who is 12, and Everett, who is 10. So, Bill, we're very excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Jimmy. Happy to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's funny, the stuff I deal with at prep, and then I'm reading through your bio and all the high-level stuff that you've been doing through your career. It's pretty impressive.
Well, it's funny. It's been a long time since someone has called me Captain Speros, so that was a nice go back to the past. But yeah, nice,
figured I'd add that in there for you.
Nice introduction. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, yeah, and it's great to see, as you've gone on and had this success in your career, all the various different things you've been able to do. I'm excited for this conversation with you. I think we're going to have a lot of great stuff.
I am too. I'm, as they say on the radio, long-time listener, first-time caller. I've listened to these podcasts, and it's not only great to just see, obviously I've known many of the people that you've spoken to on the podcast, but just to hear these different perspectives of prep graduates and Villa graduates and how that's helped them get to where they are today. And I hope that this is, also helpful for the students there who might listen in and get some insights on what their prep education can do for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you don't mind, before we jump into some of the questions I have for you, sharing with us your perspective. Your kids are at prep. How was this first year as a parent's perspective for the co-ed prep? Can you mind sharing?
I'll say not only from a parent's perspective, but by all accounts, from people I've spoken to, it was a resounding success. I mean, it's funny. Brian Markley, who was my classmate at prep and has been teaching AP Chem for 20 plus years, he had my daughter Bella for freshman seminar. And so I don't know, 3-4 weeks into the school year, I said, so what's it been like? Give me the inside scoop. What's it like having girls on campus and mixed in the classes with the boys? And he said, Bill, these girls are just lifting this place up. Like they are very prepared and they're very serious students. And I think you can tell by the kids all being on the same campus together that they wanted to be together. They did everything together when they were on separate campuses except attend classes together. And it's the next logical step. And I know there were many reasons for the decision, but I think there's nothing but positive reaction, at least that I've encountered, about the actual experience of them being in that amazing new building and the girls getting to benefit from the new facilities just like the boys would. And we were very pleased. It was a little surreal every morning dropping, so we had an exchange student last year, Emma Bertoni, who was from Milan, Italy. And so she was a senior, Bella a freshman, and Coco as part of the 8th grade honors program. So every day I was dropping 3 girls off at my all-boys alma mater. And it was a little surreal, but it was cool. It was great. I loved watching the boys and girls walking into school together. And again, all the reports I got from my girls and from everyone else was that it was a great year.
Yeah. And that's really exciting to hear and encouraging as well. It really did feel like walking through the halls, there was a new energy in the school that hadn't been there for a while. Yeah. So it's awesome to hear that was the perspective you had as a parent too, talking with your girls and everything.
Well, another thing that I'll say is I attended the graduation ceremony because Emma was going through it, walking across the stage. And I think it's the first time I've been to the Warner for that ceremony since I actually graduated, and I thought it was just lovely. I mean, just to see the girls up there in their traditional white gowns and the boys in their traditional dinner jackets and graduating together, and I really give the class of 2023 so much credit. I mean, there were so many naysayers on the outside saying this shouldn't happen or shouldn't happen the way it did or it's never going to work, and they kind of just they were great leaders within that school. They kept their heads down and they just did everything they had to do to have a great school year. Yeah, and I think that's a real tribute to that class.
Absolutely,
and watching them graduate.
They paved the way.
Yeah, for sure,
and been through a lot during the 4 years.
I mean, I can't imagine. Someone had said that. I can't imagine another class going through as much change given COVID and the merger and everything else. I mean, and to come out of that successful, and that's
It'll be a tight class for years to come. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And, talking about prep, like you mentioned, dropping those girls off to your all-boys alma mater.
Right.
Talk to us about, your time at prep, a little bit about why you decided to go to school there. What were some of your favorite memories as a student and things like that?
Yeah, I decided to go there. I went to a parochial school. I went to Villa Maria Elementary.
Oh, cool.
About 100 years ago when it was downtown. And I had an older sister who was 3 years older than me, my sister Polly, and she went to Villa. Yeah. And so, right around 5th grade, 6th grade, when you're starting to think about high school, I had that influence because prep and Villa were always connected in some way or form, whether formally or not. And so, Polly going to Villa, I was exposed to Villa and to prep kids. A lot of the kids I went to school with and that I met playing against in sports or what have you from the other parochial schools, they were headed to prep. And so really, I don't really remember considering any other option. I really just always wanted to be a Rambler. And I was happy I made that decision. Yeah. I really enjoyed my time there. And you went there. You end up finding these little pockets of people that you become engaged with every day, whether that's for you played baseball, right?
Yeah,
so
correct.
For you, it might have been the baseball team. And for me, I played soccer and basketball and ran track, and I was on speech and debate. And you find these little pockets of people that you end up making a connection with for one reason or another. And you don't realize it at the time, but the memories you make every day, like that's the basis for a lifelong friendship. Yeah. I've got lots and lots of different groups of friends in my life, whether that be from law school or my time in the Air Force or my professional life now, but some of my closest friends are the guys and gals that went to prep and Villa when I was there. Yeah. Still. And we're still in touch now, and we even though we may live far apart, we travel to get together and spend time together. So.
Well, and to your point, so like you said, I played baseball. There's a classmate of mine, Paul Wojtek. I'll give him a little shout out here. He's getting married in September, and getting an invitation to his wedding. In the mail, it's like you said. I mean, lifelong friendships. I played baseball with the kid from when I was 12, 13 years old, all the way through my time at prep, and just had a good friendship with him. We've stayed in touch through the years. He lives in South Carolina now, and it's cool to be able to be a part of people's lives for all those years to come. From just having that time at prep together and being able to have that community like you were talking about.
Well, I mean, case in point, just last night, it was 8 Great Tuesdays, and some of my kids wanted to go down and listen to music. And my friend John Stephanie, who graduated with me from prep, now lives in Bangkok. He and his wife and their 2 boys have lived in Southeast Asia for years now, between Manila and Bangkok. He happens to be in town this week visiting his family. And so the 2 of us, we met up and just had a drink and listened to the music. And it was funny, the music was like, 80s hair metal bands, covers. And, I can't remember the last time the 2 of us listened to Pour Some Sugar on Me together, but we did last night. And there were, we had gotten into a conversation where, imagine the places we've both been in the world, literally all over the globe, and yet we still find time to catch up when we're in Erie or anywhere near each other. And it's great. Special friendships you make at prep.
So it makes that brotherhood that we always talk about and the sisterhood at Villa just so special because, and then last thing I'll say, this past Friday night we had a reunion weekend, right?
Of course,
reunion night. And, just to see, we had over 400 people in attendance.
Yeah, I saw some of the photos. It looked great.
Yeah, a lot of fun and just fun to see everyone interacting with their classes together and talk about the old times. And it's as if they were at school yesterday together.
Right. Yeah. And what's nice about those reunion weekends is the mixture of those classes that could be 30, 40 years apart, but because they fall on a 3 or an 8 or whatever, they're there together, and you get to mingle not only with your classmates, with whom you might already be in pretty close touch, but I ran into Billy Flanagan recently, and I met his daughter for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And she said, yeah, I'm a class of 2019 graduate from Villa. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so old. I said, I was 89 from prep. And she was, oh, we'll go to reunions together. I said, yeah, I guess. And not really together, but yeah, sure. I mean, many years between us, but we'll go to reunions together, which I thought was kind of neat.
That is neat, yeah. That's so funny. That's cool. And, those are the things that just make that time special. Yeah. You talk about those 4 years and, the decisions you made to go there was influence of your sister, with her villa and stuff. Anything else from your time at prep that stands out to you that you really just cherish?
Just all of it.
I know.
Of course, there's the stories that live on through, talking with your friends. And my wife, Amanda, always laughs because I would tell her these stories about the shenanigans and the classes and the things we did together at this all-boys school I went to up in Erie. And she's like, I just assumed all of those stories were completely embellished and mostly made up by you until I met your friends from prep, and they all told the same stories. So you either all embellished them together over the years, or that's truly how it happened.
It's probably a mixture of both, but
the truth is somewhere in the middle, as with all things. But I just really appreciate the men and women that I'm friends with from my time at prep, because they're just, and the Villa girls that we went to school with, they're just really great people, and really have had a big influence on my life back then through today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so now after you graduated from prep, what was the next steps for you? I know you went on to the United States Air Force Academy. What led you deciding to do that, and how'd that come about for you?
Yeah, so the Service Academy is for people who don't really know, whether it's Air Force or West Point or Annapolis. They're a full 4-year college. They're very different from a normal college experience that one might experience on a regular campus, but they're a full 4-year university.
Yeah.
And for me, I had a small family. My father passed away when I was 3, and my mom, raised my sister and I as a single mom. So, like all kids, I was looking for scholarships and opportunities to go to school for less money. So when it was suggested to me that I might be a candidate to go to one of the service academies where you can get a top-notch education and it's free, I certainly started looking into that. I had the opportunity to visit the Air Force Academy when I was a sophomore through a leadership conference that was out in Denver.
Yeah.
And I also had the opportunity to visit Annapolis at some point when I was in high school, and I applied and got a nomination from my congressman and got appointed to the Air Force Academy, and at that point it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And frankly, I really didn't give a lot of thought to the service commitment afterwards.
Yeah.
I never really thought, after that I'll be in the Air Force and I'll have to be an officer. I really just thought about what a great opportunity for my education, for college. Of course, once I got out there, it became apparent very quickly that I was living a different life, and I was now part of the active duty military. And but it turned out to be one of those decisions that I look back on, and I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing too how God can direct your steps and you don't even really realize in the moment as it's coming about, and then all of a sudden you reflect years later and you're like, oh, I know why that happened. I know why that happened, and you can connect those dots.
Yeah, and sometimes when you take those steps in your life, you feel like, oh gosh, I'm really deviating from whatever path I thought I would have for myself. And I've always said, like, you got to be flexible. Like, no one would think someone who is now an attorney and a solicitor, in a municipal government, had to go through training at the Air Force Academy and be a pilot for you. Well, I didn't have to do that.
Right.
But it certainly has shaped who I am as a person and a professional today. And I think an eye for those opportunities instead of staying starkly stuck on what it is you think should be the correct path. Like you said, God's put those opportunities in front of you, and sometimes you have to jump on them.
Well, and, it's a great point. Just kind of note that here in the podcast is, it's not a failure if you're just being bold and you're going for something, whether it works out or not. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying something out and seeing how it works, because look at your example. You didn't know that was necessarily the path, and it worked out great for you.
Yeah, it has worked out for me, for sure. And if that path didn't work out, I would just let it lead to another path that would.
Exactly. So in terms of active duty, the missions you served on, for whatever you are able to share, what can you tell us about your experience, what that was like on active duty, some of the things I read off?
Sure. I started off flying Learjets, C-21 Learjets out of Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, my first assignment after pilot training. And the Learjet is basically a Lear 35 business jet that the Air Force reconfigures to do VIP transport and aeromedical evacuations. So out of DC, I was in a little flying unit of about 25 pilots. A lot of us were academy grads, a lot of us were pretty young, and we got to fly dignitaries around, and sometimes that meant just flying a senator back to his home state. Sometimes it meant flying Pentagon officials overseas where they needed to go.
Wow.
And sometimes it meant being on alert and called in the morning, middle of the night, like early morning, to take a transplant patient somewhere for a medical evacuation. And it was great. It was because not only I got to fly a great, cool little jet, but I met some neat people, got some great experience, which led me on to my follow-on assignment. And I flew in my follow-on assignment C-5 Galaxies, which is our largest outsized cargo airlifter. It's the largest airplane in the world, really. It's about the size of a 747, but much fatter, so you can drive a couple of tanks into its belly and take them off somewhere. And that was kind of two different assignments. So initially, prior to 9/11, it was doing a lot of what we called our regular milk runs and resupplying troops and equipment over the Pacific and over the Atlantic to our military bases, wherever they might be. But then after 9/11, it was almost all combat support missions. And instead of staying in a hotel or in an officer's quarters on a base and getting to kind of have a little bit of time off in some local culture where, whether you be in Germany or England, a lot of these missions were downrange to a country that ends in Stan or the Middle East. And it was, staying in austere locations and a little bit more serious. But both were great. Both experiences were great, and it got an opportunity to serve my country and to see the world.
Yeah, I can imagine that was probably pretty neat. The amount of people that you got to meet. You talk about flexibility, getting a call middle of the night. Hey, we need you to go do this and that. You got to be ready. Right?
Yeah, and it's a lot easier that I did that earlier in my life, before being married, before children. But I did, like Amanda and I met while I was still flying, and I was overseas a lot, and there were times where I was in places where I couldn't talk to her during the war. I couldn't, just pick up the phone and call her. I remember during the war, I had 3 days off, and I was in Kuwait at the time, and I came home in February, and I took the LSAT because I knew I wanted to go to law school at some point. I celebrated Amanda's birthday, and I proposed to her. I had 3 days off, and that's what I had to squeeze in. Exactly. And then I went back overseas.
You learned productivity really quick.
Luckily, all three went well. We had a good birthday party. She said yes, and I did pretty well on the LSAT, so it was a successful weekend.
It was a good weekend,
Right.
You had no choice, right? They all had to be hit.
All had to be. A lot of studying for the LSAT up at altitude with the autopilot on, but it's you got to do. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, from your time at the military, how would you say the leadership lessons that you learned during that time have helped you through your career now, as the second part of your career now in the law space?
Immeasurably. I mean, it's unbelievable the things you can learn when you are aircraft commander of a group of 12 to 14 men and women who have a combat mission that they have to be successful in. And there's so many things that it'd be impossible to try to quantify all the leadership lessons that I learned. First as a follower in the Air Force, and then as a leader. But when you let me know some of the things we might be talking about in this podcast, I thought of 3 life lessons that I learned. And some of them I may have learned slightly before the military, and they were just solidified while I was in the military. And some of them I learned, and they're very simple. But it's surprising to me how many people don't make this a part of their professional life. And the first one is be on time. That is so important when you're flying a combat mission, when you have to leave chocks or have to land at some place within a certain window. And it should translate to everyday life. And so many people get by just being late, that's their thing, they're never on time. But to me, it is, if you're on time, you're 5 minutes late. You have to be on time. And with that comes the preparation that you have to do ahead of time to not only be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, but prepared for the meeting. Have the paperwork with you. Study up, get smart on what you need to get smart on. Nothing will tick a judge off more than you have counsel in front of them who doesn't know what case they're talking about when they bring it up.
Well, I'll say I'm very happy I was 5 minutes early. 8:55, I checked my phone, I was waiting for you.
I walked down to the lobby of the courthouse and you were standing there, so good. So maybe I was the one on the
how's that time?
Nice job. So be on time. Second one that I always, follow through. If you say you're going to do something, whether that's in your professional or your personal life, do it. How many times have you been on a call where there's an after action item that gets handed to somebody, and they're like, yep, I'm on it, and then nothing. You don't hear from that person. And multiple follow-ups, it might never get done. To me, if you say you're going to do something, do it. And even if that means it's late, and even there's some embarrassment about how late it is, do it. You said you're going to do it. Even if that means just, apologizing. Sorry, this is a file that sat in the corner of my desk a month longer than it should have, but I've gotten to it now.
Yeah.
And that, again, translates to every aspect of my life. If I RSVP to a party and say I'm going to be there, I show up. I really do try to show up.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Well, it's your reputation, it's who you are, and you carry enough of that around where you are that person who's on time, you're responsible, you follow through. It's who you are, and people get to know you as that, and you gain trust that way too. Versus you send in the RSVP, you don't show up, no big deal.
Yeah.
You just got to notch down on that person because they were expecting you to come somewhere because you said you were going to be there.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can overcome a bad first impression, but it's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It really is.
Correct.
So. And then the third thing is, I don't remember whoever said it to me in these words, but they've always stuck with me, and that is, as a leader, know when to shut up. It's just because you're the leader in a particular process doesn't mean you are the expert in every aspect of that process. You will have team members who know more than you do and who have the experience that you don't, that you need to lean on. And there are times when you need to step back and listen. That old adage of you're not learning anything when your mouth is moving, and it's true.
Yeah.
As a leader, you have to be able to step back and delegate responsibility to people who might be better at a particular task than you are.
Yeah.
And that's hard for some leaders. They're type A personalities. They just want to always be at the forefront. It's hard for me. It's something I struggle with. I really struggle with delegating things to other people. I think, oh gosh, this will be so much easier if I just do it.
Right.
No, not always the case. And the extra time put into mentoring and coaching someone through a process as a leader will be worth it in the long run.
Right.
They will be a better member of your team. You will have more success if you do that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing these three things because I think it's so important that with, the way I craft these episodes of the podcast, we really want to hit on leadership, right? We want to talk about these topics that, yes, we're going to ask some other questions about success and whatnot, but really it's developing us as leaders, right? We want to be leaders in our communities. We want to be leaders for our family. And these are three important elements that it takes to be successful.
Yeah, very
to
simple.
Be a good
very
leader.
simple things, but often lost in the shuffle.
Yeah,
So.
and it's taken some time to reflect on these and what it means. So if you're a listener to this podcast, what it means for you, right? How these apply to you. And you might think you're doing great with these, but how can you even be better, right? How can we even step it up a little bit?
Right.
So, in terms of, now your legal profession, right, for what you do for a career, how do you define success in terms of what you do? And how has your definition of success maybe evolved over the time, too?
Yeah, sure. And I think it is always a moving target. I mean, for some people, from the minute they start working until the minute they retire, their definition of success is make a lot of money. And in the services profession, like the legal world, it can't be that. If you're successful, that might come. But really, it's doing right by your clients. It's positive results for your clients. That, to me, is success. Just like in the education world, it's a good education for your students. They are your customers.
Right.
And it does shift over time in that as you get older and have changes to your family life and other responsibilities outside the workplace, there's other things to consider, work-life balance. Do I have to take a pay cut here to get a better job or maybe better opportunity for advancement? But ultimately, if you're in a services industry, like the legal profession, like private practice, your client's happiness is the number one measure of your success.
And, I've heard a long time ago that, yes, we all want to be successful and make money, like if that's how you define success, but really, the more value you can provide, the money will follow.
Yeah.
Meaning, like you just said, if you do right by your clients, the more value you can provide clients over time, the more the money's just going to follow.
Yeah, and the clients will come back to you. They'll like your services. They will find you again. And that doesn't always mean winning every case. I mean, success within each case is defined differently. You might technically lose a case, but if you settled it to a point where it is financially a better outcome for your client, you've done right by them. If the idea is just that they need to set up a business and you find a way to set it up for them that's going to make them more successful, not only helps them, but hopefully that will lead to success in their business, which will mean they will need more legal services down the road, and they will come back to you if you've done a good job for them, if you've been responsive and professional and put in the work. I think adding value to someone else's life will add value to yours eventually. Right?
Exactly. And a little bit earlier you were talking about knowing when to shut up, and you're talking about delegating things to team members and kind of having that humble spirit about you to be able to do that. So what are your thoughts on how you effectively manage and motivate team members, and then also, fostering an environment of collaboration and respect among team members? So I'm sure there's people who look at you like you're their superior. How do they bring ideas to you without, feeling, I wonder if he's going to be okay with this or not? So in terms of the realm of managing a team, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jimmy, I think you said the magic word when you said like respect, mutual respect. That's absolutely it. And, whether that's respect up the chain of command or down the chain of command, so to speak. No team member will continue to contribute if they feel like their viewpoint and their experience and what they bring to the table is not valued. So by showing them respect, giving them an opportunity to not only take on tasks but to lead certain tasks, and showing that that's valued, that's the best way to keep a person on your team engaged. Because if they don't feel that way, they will eventually find something else to invest their time and efforts into.
Right.
So yes, sometimes you are by name their leader, like if you're in the military or if you're the first chair on a litigation team, or sometimes it just organically become the leader in a group. But the way to keep all of your team members engaged and contributing is to constantly be professional and show respect to those people. Doesn't mean you can't have fun, doesn't mean you can't tell, appropriate jokes, it doesn't mean there can't be a time for play. But there always has to be professionalism and mutual respect among all members of a team.
Yeah, I think that's critical in what you're talking about there, just that mutual respect to have for one another. And people bring value to the table. It's different than what you and I have. And so I'm sure, reading through your bio, there's a lot of different high stakes level of, responsibilities you've had in your career. Some different things that have been quite demanding. And when you talk about team members and showing respect and value, but what about the flip side? I mean, I'm sure you've been in situations where there's probably conflict involved, meaning like there's one person wants to see it this way, maybe you or somebody else sees it the other way. So, when it comes to situations where I think a lot of times as leaders, we're a lot of type A personalities, right? So you get people in the room and I want it done this way, somebody else wants it done that way. How do you, then work through conflicts that may arise, and how do you maintain professionalism through the process of doing that?
That's really probably the most difficult task for any leader, especially in today's society where you can't even have discourse about any hot button topic, whether it's online or in person, without people getting pretty worked up. And I think the best way to try to avoid those conflicts, or you're always going to have conflicts, but avoid those conflicts from getting out of hand and from actually hindering the team, is to stay focused on the problem. Too many people want to win the argument rather than solve the problem, whatever that problem might be. And if as a team you're faced with a task and your team is divided on how to accomplish that task, if you stay focused on, listen, we need an end outcome here. We're trying to solve X. And if we keep arguing about which direction we have to go to get there, and people then become personal, and then you find you're not on track anymore. You're not focused on the actual outcome that you're trying to achieve. Try to keep the team focused on that. We might not do it your way this time. We might do it your way next time. But we're a team that we've got to get to the end, and whatever that outcome might be, winning a basketball game or winning a court case or landing an airplane on an austere runway in the middle of nowhere when you're having anti-aircraft fire taking pot shots at you and you're a big, fat, slow-moving target. That's only happened to me a couple of times. So, but you have to keep the team focused on the prize. Because too many times a difference of opinion will get people defocused from that, and that's when teams suffer.
Man, that is so good right there. I mean, that is such a game changer. Just to be a leader, to take yourself out of the situation, to be able to identify what you just said right there, that is crucial. I mean,
and it's really hard to see when you're in it.
And
especially when, for students listening to this podcast, when you're in the middle of high school and you're on a soccer team and all of a sudden you're playing a position that you're not used to playing because your coach thinks that's the best place for you to be. Again, if you're worried about how am I going to play this position, how am I going to do this, you might get focused off of the actual mission. But if instead you just take the coaching and work hard and realize this is what's best for the team, the ultimate outcome is the team's success. And I will have success if the team has success. So it might not happen the way I thought, but if I just trust the process and put in the work, good things will happen.
And I'll say, my first thought was to say this generation, but I'll say even this day and age to talk about, I think so many people are so self-conscious of their own accolades and their own success that a lot of people forget the focus on the bigger picture of the team, because we're in a culture where let's post the pictures about how great this accomplishment was on Facebook or Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is. And it's like, yes, your personal accolades are great, but don't let that overtake the team's accomplishments and what it means to be a part of a unit. Like you just talked about that simple example for the soccer team, being a player on the team. The bigger picture is the team and the outcome and the goal there, not your own personal success in regards to you're a part of a team, you're a part of a group, a community. Let's make that successful first, and the personal success will follow from there.
Agreed. And to take the sports analogy even further, like you look at the really, really successful people in sports, the Tom Bradys and the Peyton Mannings, and you never read about their history in here. They were a standout quarterback in high school, and their team went 1-11. They never won a game. No, they multiple state champions because they not only greatness begets other greatness. You do really well. Other players who are good want to play around you, but you have to work together.
Correct.
If those players all worried about their personal accolades, they wouldn't have had the success, which wouldn't have drawn the attention of the media and the recruiters to that team, which then ended up in them going to college and then on to the pros. So, that's just the sports world, but team success results in individual success and accolades. If you're focused on the latter before the first happens, probably not focused on the right thing.
Right, exactly. And, so again, that, talks a lot about communication styles as a leader, right? So, and not so much styles, but more when you can take yourself out of a situation and you can direct the team into the mission, the bigger picture of the problem you're trying to solve. So when as a communication piece for a leader, what strategies maybe do you employ to ensure that clear and concise communication is among your team, your clients as you're working, and how important just clear communication can be?
Yeah, I think clear and concise. Those are the two things. You said them both, and they're really important because you lose your audience if you go on for too long. I have these, I don't know if they're rules, but they're these unwritten kind of guidelines for myself. If I'm sending someone an email, 5 lines or less. I really, unless I have to give more information than that, I keep it to 5 lines. And if that's like an introductory line and 4 bullet points under it, so be it.
Yeah.
Because people move on. You get the whole TLDR. Too long, didn't read. They moved on to something else. So if it's an email, I try to keep it to 5 lines. If it's a spoken message, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a podcast and you're rambling on like I am right now.
This is appropriate format for this.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, you lose your audience. But if you focus on 1 or 2 key points, deliver your message, that is probably the best way to get a point across. You'll have time to get those additional points across that you think are so important right now, but keep it short. And then finally, proofread.
Yeah.
Like how many times you get an email, you start reading it, and 3 words in, they cut off a sentence, and it's clear that they cut and pasted something. And yes, you might still get the message, but you're probably not going to put as much weight on that message as you might have otherwise. So spell check everything. Proofread. I never press send. I won't say never. I try not to press send without spell checking and double checking everything I've written. And that includes things I've said.
Yeah.
If I've misspoken, I correct myself. If somebody corrects me, I learn from it. I don't make that mistake again. It's just clear, concise, and correct communications in any format.
Yeah.
Really, really important. Among your team, among your professional workplace.
Well, and the other thing that you said there too with being concise, I really believe it's a skill because I think there's so much good stuff people have learned how to make things sound nowadays when writing a post and doing this. But when you send an email and you're in the professional world now and we're talking about more direct messages to a team and we're talking about working with your clients and we're talking about being a leader, right? We're not talking about anything else right now other than being a leader, and this is the application we're talking. It's a skill to learn how to remove the fluff of what you want to say. All this stuff sounds good. How do you get down to the crux of what is the most important thing for if I'm sending an email to you? What's the most important thing I'm trying to get across? It's really a skill to be able to formulate that. And it takes practice. Don't get down on yourself if you can't figure it out right away.
Like anything, it takes practice and repetition, a lot of it. And I go back and read articles or emails that I wrote 2-3 years ago. I'm like, who did I think I was impressing with this language? It's flowery, and I might have even Googled that word before I used it. It doesn't contribute to the message.
Right.
Keep it simple. Use words that your audience will understand and appreciate, and make it quick.
Yes, exactly. Right. Unless you're on this podcast.
Right. Thank you for the license you're giving me to just ramble.
It's a good opportunity.
I don't get a chance to talk like this. I talk to my kids for 10 seconds. They're already in the next room. They're already moved on to the next thing. So.
Well, hey, kudos. If your kids are still listening to the podcast up to this point, maybe they get a special treat or snack or something. Well, that's my kids. They're at the age that special treats and snacks work for them. Your kids are a little older.
Yeah, I have to promise different things like rides places or a car. I was almost 16. So.
Oh, man. Well, she's listening. This is her chance to tell you,
It'll be a good test. It'll be a good test to see if she does.
Oh, man. So, Kind of more specific question now, catered to your profession, but this is, I think, good understanding for anybody in any profession also. But how do you stay updated on the latest developments and changes in the legal field? And how do you encourage your team members to continually learn and grow in their positions as well?
That's really important in my profession, in all professions, but in the legal, I mean, a single court decision can change the law.
Right.
So you have to stay updated, and I think there's two ways to do that. The first way is formally. Like within our firm, we have regular department meetings, practice area meetings, where we literally assign to our associates, our colleagues, a report on a particular Supreme Court case or on a particular regulation that's just been coming out that's out there in the public for comment. And we formally make sure we stay updated. And that's very helpful because someone else is doing a lot of the work for you and is condensing all the information you need down into something that you can absorb within one meeting or one reading.
Yeah.
But then secondly, it has to happen also organically. I mean, in my profession, the only way I was as a young lawyer going to learn was by talking to the people who'd gone before me, talking to the older partners, talking to clients within their legal departments, and learning from them.
Yeah.
And so to stay on top of things, it's not just consciously making the effort to read articles and to follow court decisions and to stay updated on the news. It's also talking to people and learning from what are the latest trends, what are you seeing in front of this particular judge?
Right.
What types of decisions are coming out of that district that I need to be aware of if I'm going to practice there? I think it has to happen both ways.
Yeah. And also, I mean, if you're somebody young in this field listening to this episode, I would imagine it's years of experience also that add in with this. So don't feel like there's so much information that where am I ever going to start? It's just starting where you're at today, right?
Yeah.
It's just asking those questions today. It's reading a little bit today. Over time, you'll be very well versed in a lot of different areas, but don't feel discouraged about how much there is to know. Because I bet I would feel that way.
Oh, I think everybody does, no matter what their profession is.
Correct.
You just have to accept that there are going to be things you learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And that's the way you backfill that gap in your experience, then that's fine. So be it. But the only way to do it is just to dive in and start learning.
Yeah, and I like the part you said about the formally, being able to get together with team members and discuss things together and work through that.
Yeah.
I like that. So I just got a few more questions for you, here. But one of the questions that I'd sent over to you that I wanted to reflect on is, can you share some of the habits or routines that have contributed to your personal and professional success in your career?
Yeah.
So I was curious to hear what maybe some things there.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, I'm not one of those people that's like superstitious and does something the same way every time.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, like there are times when I'm in the great habit of going to the gym, for example, daily, and right now, last few months, I've been terrible about it. So I won't, I won't say that I'm the best person when it comes to routines, but there are a couple of things that I do religiously that I do think help me on a daily basis. The first one is, and the first one is probably going to catch me some flack because people always say you shouldn't read in bed, right? You shouldn't look at your phone first thing. Yeah. But that is the first thing I do, and I always wake up before any alarm goes off that I've set, just kind of on an internal clock, and I read the news, and I do it every morning. And if it's just a summary from goerie.com, or it's the Wall Street Journal summary, or the daily briefing from the Washington Post. Those are typically my 3 news sources. Yeah. I read what I can in the time that I have. And it just starts my day. First of all, it gets my mind engaged early. Right. It gets me thinking early on, gets the blood flowing up there. But secondly, I might come across something that I need to know for the day. Yeah. Being the county solicitor, unfortunately, sometimes I learn things in my morning read of the paper that if I didn't know coming into the day, I would be surprised and caught off guard by it. So hopefully I've already known about it ahead of time, but that's not always the case. And so that's one good habit that I think I have. The second one is, if you are lucky enough to have an administrative assistant or an executive assistant, and I have a wonderful one at my firm who is very helpful in many aspects of my practice. But one thing I do not have her do is my schedule. I do my own schedule. I do my own Outlook schedule. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do at any given time during the day. I put everything in there from all aspects of my life, including meetings with clients, all the way down to picking up a kid from swim practice. Yeah. If it's something I need to do, it's in my schedule. And the reason I do my own schedule is because I want to make sure I give the proper I honor the things that are truly important to me.
Right.
So the reason I haven't gone to the gym in a few months is because it hasn't been in my schedule.
Yeah.
I've been traveling, I've been doing different things, the summer gets busy, it's not in there, so it doesn't happen. So I think that's the second thing that I'm really religious about. I do my own schedule, and I really try to stick to it at all costs.
Yeah.
If it's not in the schedule, I won't do it. And if it's not important to me, I don't put it in the schedule.
Yeah.
So it's...
Well, I think it's I don't want to say productivity hack, but I think it's a way that you're on top of things. I mean, you know, like you go to bed, you know the next day exactly how your day is going to flow. And you know exactly probably the day after that how your day is going to flow. And when you're in control of that, you can decide, like you said, am I going to work out that day or not? Am I going to do this or that? Right. You know, you have that flexibility to be able to say, here's how I'm going to plan my day. I mean, I heard a quote years ago that was successful people plan their day days in ahead, you know, because you know exactly what you're going to get done that day. So it's no surprise you probably go to bed at night, feel accomplished because you planned your day and you know what you were going to do and you did it.
Yeah, and it's actually counterintuitive maybe to think, but it makes you more flexible. If you have a schedule, you know how you're going to get from one thing to another. Whereas, you know, if something is put into your schedule by someone else and all of a sudden it surprises you, you're A, likely not going to be on time, and B, you're not going to be prepared for it.
Right.
Those things I talked about earlier. To me, that like you said, call it a productivity hack, whatever you call it. I am pretty good about doing my own schedule and trying to stick to it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing those with me. I think those are really good things for people to, you know, listen and take into consideration as we're talking about leadership and things that you can share with us.
Of course.
So what advice would you have for aspiring lawyers who aim to achieve success, you know, in their careers? And what advice would you have for them? Whether they are early on in their career in high school, college, or they're already working early on in their career?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give to anyone aspiring to be a lawyer would be the same advice I'd give to anyone aspiring to do anything. And that is, and we talked about it a bit already, is to be flexible. Don't set a course for yourself and rigidly stick to it to the point where you miss out on opportunities. I mean, I think it's naive for any of us to think that at age 16 or 17, when we're graduating from high school or about to and are thinking about college, that we can set a path knowing everything we're going to encounter and all the side, you know, trips we may have to take to get to where we want to go. And I think there's a quote, you're just talking about quotes. I saw a quote a couple of years ago. All my kids play travel sports, and one of them, her volleyball team plays at Spire in Geneva.
Yep.
And up on the wall at Spire it's in one of the coaching rooms up on the second level. If you're ever walking around up there, you'll see. And the quote is, "There are no shortcuts to any place worth going." And I thought that was just awesome. I just loved how, first of all, how clear and concise that message is. The nuances to that message. Here's two main reasons why I love that quote.
Yeah.
It's by a woman named Beverly Sills, who in my naivete I thought, oh, she must be like a college basketball coach or something, right? Just here up at Spire.
You're right, yeah.
Opera singer.
Oh my goodness.
Opera singer, 1950 to 1970, at the height of her career, you know, said, I realize that sometimes you have to take a pretty circuitous route to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be clean and pretty. It's not always going to be the straight point between A and B. But it's such a hard-hitting quote. It's on the wall in a sports facility, which is one of the 2 Olympic training centers in the U.S., you know. So I love that it just transcends boundaries. It doesn't apply to just one sector of life.
Right.
The other reason I liked it is just because it means so much. It not only does it mean you have to put in the hard work and sometimes take a long journey to get to your goal, but it also means if you've reached a goal, if you've gotten to some goal you set for yourself and you feel like, you know, looking back, that was relatively easy. Maybe you need to set some higher goals. You know, maybe you need to set a new goal now that really challenges yourself. Don't be satisfied. Don't be complacent. Continue to put in the hard work. Take the long journeys. Let yourself get surprised. Let yourself make mistakes, because that's the really successful people, at least in my experience that I've met. They've made a ton of mistakes along the way. A ton of little tiny failures that they've learned lessons from and are now better at their job as a result.
Average is the enemy of great. Once you become, I hate the idea of just being stagnant, status quo. I always, you know, I'm just that type of person. I want to continue to set those new bars and new goals and continue to reach new heights. And like you said, you might try something, you might fail it. No big deal. Just pick yourself up, move on.
And if you are not having failures, even little minor failures from day to day, if you're just, like you said, cruising along, you're probably on a shortcut. You're probably just doing the easy thing, and that's fine. But if you really truly want to challenge yourself, don't look for the shortcuts.
Right.
Set a high but achievable goal, maybe a little bit above the reach you think you can get to. Put in the work, take the long journey, forget the shortcuts.
Right.
You might find if you get all the way there, great. If you come just a little short, if you set a high enough goal, you're still going to be feeling a lot of success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. I appreciate you sharing this all. And this has been a hard-hitting podcast episode. I love it. I mean, we've talked about some really great stuff.
Yeah, you
I mean, these have been some great answers that you provided us. And
well,
I appreciate that.
Attribute that to you. Good questions lead to good discussions. So I appreciate you having me.
So you've been a listener to the podcast, so I'm guessing you know the last question I'm going to ask you for the podcast is, I ask it for all our alumni, I guess, is if you could go back in time and speak to your graduation class to give the commencement speech, knowing what you know now, though, what would you say to your classmates?
I would again steal a line from someone else. So I'm a huge soccer fan, and therefore, like many people who love soccer, I watch Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
And Ted Lasso's the quote I love is the scene where he's throwing darts against the previous owner of the football team where he's the coach, and he says, don't be judgmental, be curious. And I just love that. It's so many times in life we are faced with somebody's viewpoint or lifestyle or culture that is different from ours, and instead of being curious and asking questions and learning, we just take a position and we're predisposed to judging things in a certain way. And not just other people or other cultures, but situations. Oh, my team can't do that.
Yeah.
That's just not in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Don't be judgmental. Be curious. You know what? Let's start with yes.
Yeah.
Let's start with yes and see if we can get to a way where we can actually achieve that. And I think when you're a young kid coming out of high school, coming out of prep, and you think, there's no way I can go to that college. Or there's no way that I could be in the medical field. I can't stand the sight of blood. I can't contribute there. Don't be so quick to judge. Be curious. Ask the questions. What other things can I do in that field? What does that college offer in this particular discipline? Ask the questions from people who know more than you, because a lot of people out there know more than you when you're 17 and 18. Ask the questions. Be curious. And it will help you so much. It will open your mind to things that you might not otherwise be open to, and it'll make you smart. It'll make you more intelligent, smarter.
Right.
Like you'll know more about the world you're going into. So I think those are probably the words I'd say to somebody.
Yeah.
Don't think you have it all figured out. Ask a lot of questions. Be curious.
To me, it's have a growth mindset, not a closed mind.
Yep.
That's
another way to put it, and I like that too, because that's what it's all about, growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all about growing as a person.
Amen.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Bill, I really appreciate the time you shared with us today for the podcast episode. I know I've personally learned a ton, and I know our listeners here on the podcast are going to learn a ton by what you've been able to share with us today. So appreciate all you've done, through the years, and thank you for being involved with Prep and the different boards that you do, and thank you for everything you do for the community.
Truly my pleasure. I learned a lot from today's podcast as well, and I think you're doing a great job. Keep the advancement stuff going. I appreciate everything you do for my alma mater and for my kids' school now. I mean, anyone who goes to Prep ends up almost assuredly at some point having a different relationship with Prep than they started as a student.
Right.
Then they might become a parent or a donor or a partner or whatever it might be. And as someone who has a lot of different relationships with that school now, I really appreciate the work that you and your colleagues do over there. I think it's a special place, and it's why I'm proud to have gone there and why I'm sending my kids there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Take care.